This episode is brought to you by Shopify. How does a manga for teenage boys, published in the same magazine as Dragon Ball, One Piece, and Naruto, end up on display in the same museum as the Mona Lisa? Well, I can tell you this, it wasn't just a fluke. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has had gallery exhibits in Paris, museum displays in London, collaborations with Gucci, and even in Japan it was only the second manga ever to be featured in the country's largest art museum. But if you know JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, this doesn't really fit with its reputation. This is the manga from all the memes, the manga with the farting dog and the rock, paper, scissors fight. I wanted to find out why, out of all the comics produced across the globe, this insane manga is one of the few embraced by the worlds of high art and high fashion. Well, I was in luck, because while most manga artists don't give many interviews, not only has JoJo's creator Hirohiko Araki given dozens of interviews, he recently wrote a book, and well, let me just read you a passage from it. Writing this book feels akin to a worker divulging his company's trade secrets, or a magician revealing his illusions, or a chef giving away a secret family recipe. See, I had read JoJo before, but reading this book and learning more about Araki's personal story has given me an entirely different perspective on it, and I think I can now understand why the worlds of high art and high fashion chose to embrace him. But to understand this, we have to go back, because it wasn't just manga readers who misunderstood Hirohiko Araki. To quote Araki himself, "I wonder if I'm somehow cursed to be forever misunderstood by others." It's the 1960s in Sendai, a small city in northern Japan known as the City of Trees. Young Hirohiko Araki is the victim of twin younger sisters who always gang up on him, who get him blamed for everything, and he begins to feel like an outcast even in his own home. This curse follows him to school, where he always gets blamed for things he didn't do. He becomes the shy kid in the corner, the one who watches as the other kids play. This ostracization leads him to feel further misunderstood by his classmates. But there's one thing that keeps him going: manga. As his sisters monopolize the TV downstairs, young Araki disappears into the safety of his room to read manga. Manga, and later movies, help Araki to get through his difficult childhood, but as he grows older, he begins to worry about his future. How will he find a job when it's so hard for him to just fit in with other people? And then, one day, a classmate brings something into school that will change his life. The very first issue of a new manga magazine, Shonen Jump. In it is a manga by the legendary Ikki Kajiwara, which tells the story of an aspiring manga artist. And he realizes in this moment, this could be the path for him. A solitary profession, but one that allows him to express himself the way he can't around other people. But this is the late 60s, and working in manga is not a respectable career, so he doesn't even tell his parents of his ambition. But he does draw. From a young age, he starts making his own manga. He takes local art classes and studies by redrawing his favorite series. Babel 2, Kamui Den, and the works of Ikki Kajiwara become his textbooks. Now, Shonen Jump is always on the lookout for new talent, and they regularly run contests for readers to submit their own work. Araki submits his manga time and time again, but his work never gets noticed. He's stuck. He lives too far from Tokyo to get a job as an assistant to a manga artist, and he doesn't know what to do. And then, inspiration strikes from an unexpected place, but one that in retrospect makes sense. He discovers the world of fine art, specifically the French painter Paul Gauguin. Araki falls in love with Gauguin's work and receives a great shock when he learns about Gauguin's life. Gauguin had left France and moved to Tahiti with the singular focus of improving his paintings. Araki is so moved by Gauguin's dedication to his craft that he decides he will pursue becoming a full-time manga artist with the same single-minded focus. He redoubles his effort practicing drawing, and he keeps submitting to Shonen Jump, and then one day, his submission is selected for an honorable mention. His name is printed in tiny letters in the corner of one page, but he would later describe this as the happiest day of my life. Soon, Araki's in for another shock, because he opens Shonen Jump to find that the writer-artist team Yuta Tamago have just made their professional debut, and they're 16 years old, the same age as Araki. While his honorable mention may have been nice, Araki is falling behind. Despite his honorable mention, the editors at Shonen Jump had criticized him for his lack of artistic ability. So, after high school, he enrolls in a design school in his hometown. While in college, he hones his skills. He continues to submit work after work to Shonen Jump. And while during this period he gets more honorable mentions, once again he's stuck and not getting the detailed feedback he needs from the editors to grow. But it's in this difficult period that a trait that makes Araki so special begins to emerge, one that we'll see time and time again. Araki is incredibly analytical. And so he begins to study. He scrutinizes the first pages of popular manga. He realizes that the best first pages convey a lot of information, equivalent to the first few pages of a novel. He also notices that each of them do something unique, something that helps them stand out from the crowd. Armed with the results of his study, he prepares his next work. He chooses to make a western because there are very few westerns in manga, and instead of making his hero look cool, he opens with him falling backwards out of a chair. He creates a setting and a mystery by opening with this man drinking wine against a western backdrop. He cuts and refines so that every page serves a purpose, that every single panel helps fulfill what will become his lifelong mantra: make them turn the page. He titles this work Poker Under Arms.
And he won't settle for another honorable mention with a one-sentence review. He wants direct feedback.
So he tucks the manuscript under his arm and takes the train to Tokyo 5 hours away and goes directly to Shonen Jump's headquarters. He eventually gets a meeting with an editor and lays the manuscript on his desk. Before even turning the first page, the editor points at the opening panel, the one Araki had spent so much time and thought on. Even a grade schooler would have erased that. You see, Araki had no idea you were supposed to white out the lines that extended beyond the panel borders. In fact, he didn't even know about whiteout. The editor keeps turning the pages, furious, with scathing critiques on every one, saying things like, "This part is no good," or criticizing the inconsistencies and flaws in his drawings.
Suffice to say, Araki doesn't win any awards that day. While most people might feel dejected after this, Araki doesn't. He's finally gotten feedback on his work.
So when he gets home from Tokyo, he sets out to redraw the entire book, because of course, he still doesn't know about whiteout, so he's just redrawing every page until it's perfect. To finish the 30-page Poker Under Arms, he draws over 100 pages. It takes him months of working nights and weekends to finish it, but finally, his new version is ready. He resubmits this new version to Shonen Jump, and they accept it. Poker Under Arms runs as a one-shot in Shonen Jump in 1981. Finally, at 20 years old, Hirohiko Araki had made his manga debut.
But having a one-shot manga published is still a long way away from his real goal, becoming a full-time manga artist.
Going full-time means getting a work serialized, but the standards for serials are even higher than for one-shots. Despite his success with Poker Under Arms, Araki still has a lot of work ahead of him.
Look, if you haven't figured it out by now,
one of my goals with this channel is to inspire you to pursue your dreams, whether that's in comics or in whatever else you hope to achieve.
And that's the reason I've once again partnered with Shopify to help you guys turn your art, your ideas, your dreams into businesses.
Whether it's selling a product you created or opening an online comic shop, Shopify is the commerce platform for you.
And I'd like to help you guys out. So I'm going to pin a comment down below, and if you have a Shopify store, please reply to that comment with a link and a description of what you do, so I and hopefully everyone else watching this video can check it out. And if you don't already have a Shopify store, consider starting one, because Shopify makes it ridiculously easy to start your own store. With their drag and drop store editor, you can put together a custom store that fits your vision incredibly quickly and get back to making your product and building your business. And if you already have a social media following, even better, because Shopify has easy integrations that allow you to sell across all major social media platforms. Finally, I think a lot of people don't realize that Shopify doesn't just stop with your online store. If you want to sell your art at comic conventions or even open your own brick and mortar comic shop someday, Shopify Point of Sale has you covered. So what are you waiting for? Go to shopify.com/Matt with 4 T's. That's shopify.com/MATTTT to start your store today. To continue his single-minded pursuit of manga, instead of getting a job after college, he moves back in with his parents. He works around the clock on his manga and regularly takes the 5-hour train ride to Tokyo to get feedback directly from the Shonen Jump editors. But the editors are still just brutal. Sometimes they would take his manuscript out, look at the first page, say, "I don't want to read this," and hand it back to him. He would sleep on the train ride home and go right back to work as soon as he arrived. He does get a few more one-shots published, but he can't make a living off one-shots. He has to crack the code of serialization if he wants to continue. Again, without the means to move to Tokyo and become an assistant, he turns to self-study.
The problem with his work, he realizes, is the genres that he's chosen to work in. Araki loves mysteries, thrillers, and horror movies. He prefers Carrie to Star Wars. But the problems with these works is that they don't have the potential to go beyond their original plot. He realizes that the best serialized works are dependent not on plot, but on characters. In fact, some of his favorite manga series have no plot at all, so Araki needs to figure out how to create compelling characters. And once again, he finds his answer in a surprising place. This time, it's Hollywood. As I've mentioned, Araki is a lover of movies. He says his main guidebook to creating manga is Hitchcock Truffaut, and it's by reading about filmmaking that he makes his next big breakthrough. Araki learns that some Hollywood actors, in preparing for their roles, would create extensive histories for their characters, things that don't make it onto the screen but inform their performances. Based on that technique, Araki develops this sheet, which he fills out for every character he creates. In typical Araki fashion, it's both brilliant and insane. It's got 60 items on there, ranging from formative experiences as a child to pets to blood type. He uses this approach to come up with an original character, BT, a bad boy with the genius of Sherlock Holmes. Shonen Jump doesn't like how different BT is from their usual heroes, but Araki believes in the concept, and after 2 years of persistence in reworking it, he finally finds an assistant editor who will give him a shot, who agrees to publish Cool Shock BT as a serial. And so, it runs in Shonen Jump, and right away it's not embraced by readers. Shonen Jump depends on reader surveys, and the readers were clear that they do not like it. It's quickly canceled. But that wasn't the end, because after the cancellation, when the final chapter is finally published, it gets a great response.
The manga may be over, but Araki and his editor could study that final chapter and unpack what had worked about it.
It turns out that in that chapter, Araki had introduced a compelling antagonist, and so compelling antagonists become the next ingredient in his formula.
BT may be dead, but Araki had succeeded in becoming a serial manga author, even if it only lasted 10 weeks. But armed with this new knowledge, he gets right back to work on his next pitch.
See, Cool Shock BT has had another significant effect on Araki's life. He's made enough money to finally move to Tokyo, bringing him one step closer to his dream of being a full-time manga artist. The next year he gets another manga serialized, Bao the Visitor, but it too only lasts a handful of months before getting cancelled. He blames that on his failure to create a believable setting, but he knows there's something else holding him back. His art is still lacking compared to his storytelling. He's frustrated because he's studied his craft relentlessly for years. He's built up his technical skills, but artists with much less technical abilities are finding success in manga. What's going on? He returns once more to his diligent study of popular manga and makes another important discovery. All the hit series have personal, recognizable styles. The kind of manga you could see from across a train and know immediately who drew it. But being good isn't enough. Araki needs to develop his own recognizable style. He had learned to draw manga by studying manga, but now he needs to broaden his influences. Well, thankfully, now that he's living in Tokyo, he can begin immersing himself in all sorts of new things. Here were books on sale by painters and designers I had never seen before. I really admired the painters Frank Frazetta, Enki Bilal, and Antonio Lopez. I was surprised by the beauty and fashion sense of designer stores like Missoni and Versace. I also watched MTV shows late at night, and I got to see performances of Madonna and African-American rap music for the first time. Araki takes these influences into his work, but he's still falling short of creating a recognizable style. To take a break from it all, he decides to use the money he had made on Bao the Visitor to go abroad for the first time. His travels take him to Italy, and in Rome he decides to visit the Galleria Borghese. And it is here where he discovers the work that will change his life, Gian Lorenzo Bernini's Apollo and Daphne. The sculpture twists and curves, the bodies are bent to the limit to express a sensuous pose. Araki is struck and studies it from every angle. Araki would become obsessed with the posing and gesture of classical sculpture. And this idea, the elaborate, evocative, memorable posing of bodies, is the key that finally unlocks his signature style. And now he would combine everything: his drawing fundamentals, his study of popular manga, his love of MTV, fine art, high fashion, Western comics, to create a work that anyone could recognize from across the train. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Shonen Jump begins serializing JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in 1986. Here is another shot at Araki's dream of becoming a full-time serialized manga artist. Inspired by John Steinbeck's East of Eden, he envisions it as a multi-generational epic in which each part would have a different protagonist. But right away, there's a problem. Despite his new, grabbing art style, his unique setting, his chilling antagonist, and everything else he had learned, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is still getting poor survey results. Once again, he might not make it off the starting line.
So, the analytical Araki confronts his own shortcomings and studies the work of others to figure it out before it's too late. And once again, his analysis will lead him to create one of his golden rules of manga. He realizes that in shonen manga, the protagonist must always be rising, always improving his situation. But he had spent the first few chapters of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure really beating up his protagonist, and he was leaving his readers feeling depressed after each chapter. Well, just as he had mastered every other aspect of manga, so too does he master story structure and keeps JoJo's alive. And so, when he starts on JoJo's Part 3, he bases the story structure on one of his own passions: travel. Inspired by board games and the movie Around the World in 80 Days, he sets his heroes off on a globe-trotting adventure. And it's in this period where I think that JoJo's really begins to become truly magnificent. Some people say Part 3 is where it gets good because that's where he introduces Stans, the iconic fighting power, but for me it's because Araki's confidence finally begins to shine through as you watch him becoming more and more himself with every chapter. To me, this is the magic trick at the heart of JoJo's. Araki had spent so many years studying and perfecting every element of his craft that he could have easily become a cold technician, producing technically perfect comics that are lifeless. But his mastery of craft is so high that it allows him to open up, allows him to pour his personality onto every page. Through his work, you get to know this passionate weirdo with his love of travel, board games, horror movies, and prog rock. He's described JoJo as like a diary to him, and that totally fits. Like, by part 4, there's a page explaining how this guy's guitar works, with the heading, "This isn't relevant to the story." But Araki wants to draw a guitar and tell you how it works, and I'm here for it. When people look at JoJo, it's easy to see the weirdness and miss all the craft hiding just under the surface. But I dare you to find one other piece of media that is this downright odd and can also make you cry. Now, before we move on, I should mention that, unlike when I read it, Viz has published these beautiful hardcover editions that restore Araki's Gauguin-inspired color pages, and I'll put a reading guide and links for everything down below. But something was still wrong. Even though Araki had achieved his childhood dream of becoming a serialized manga artist, he hadn't scratched that deeper itch, the one that drove him to want to be a manga artist in the first place. In a 2002 interview, 14 years into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, he would say, "I often feel like I'm not 100% understood when it comes to manga." Sadly, despite his success, Araki still felt misunderstood by the world around him.
Let's take a quick detour. In his book, Araki says something that I found very profound. He says that manga is closer to painting or sculpture than it is to anime or movies.
Maybe that sounds obvious, but the way Araki says it helped me understand it better.
The composition, the color tone, the characters' expressions, the line work, everything that comes together to form a picture can create an impact in a still image that moving images just can't match. What's wonderful about still drawings is their ability to create what I think of as eternal moments, what would otherwise be fleeting moments captured within particles of pigment. He goes on to write about how he could stare at the Mona Lisa for hours. I think this is what Araki is trying to do on every page, to etch some part of himself down in permanent form. But it seems to me that he doesn't feel that the average manga reader appreciates all of this work. And yeah, perhaps that's a consequence of having one of your main characters be a dog who likes to fart in people's faces, but still.
In the early 2000s, I believe Araki really wants to change this perception, he just doesn't know how. And then he has a fateful encounter that will change his life.
One day, a little 9-year-old girl told me, "You draw so well. I realized that even those who don't read my manga can appreciate my art." And so, Araki makes a plan. He decides to organize an art show to show his original drawings to the world for the first time. But he's strategic about this. He chooses to do this show in Paris, where his manga isn't very popular, but where fine art is appreciated. He chooses a reputable gallery that has shown Renoir and Chagall, and he purposely doesn't inform his Japanese readers about the show. He doesn't want manga fans to come, he wants the real art crowd, who, like this little girl, have no preconceived notions about him. The show opens in 2003, and it's a huge success. He's embraced by people from all walks of life who are encountering him as he hoped, as an artist first and a manga artist second. On the heels of this success, in 2005, Araki makes another dramatic change. He takes JoJo's out of Shonen Jump, the magazine that had inspired him to become a manga artist in the first place, that had published every one of his major works since he was 20 years old. Why? Because he wants to move to a monthly magazine. Now, unlike a lot of manga artists, Araki has never missed a deadline. He had turned out 19 pages of new art every week with incredible consistency.
But now, perhaps emboldened by the success of his art show, he wants to slow down and spend more time on his art.
And the resulting arc of JoJo's Steel Ball Run would become what many consider his masterpiece.
On myanimelist.com, Steel Ball Run is the second highest rated manga of all time.
And so, in 2009, when the Louvre decides to put on an exhibit celebrating comic artwork, they select 5 artists from around the globe. And by 5 artists from around the globe, I mean 4 from France and Belgium, and 1 from Japan. Hirohiko Araki. That's right, after 30 years of tireless work, from honing his craft by practicing the basics to copying the manga masters, across so many failures and false starts, to finding inspiration in the worlds of fashion and high art, Araki had finally arrived. Many successful exhibitions and collaborations have followed in the years since, but I think this marked the turning point, because this showing in the Louvre, in the same museum as the Mona Lisa, proved to Araki that he was finally understood.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe.
If you want more Araki beyond just reading JoJo's, of course,
I really recommend you pick up his book. It was my primary source for this video, and I'll link it down below.
In fact, I tried to apply his storytelling techniques for this video, so if you found it more engaging than my usual videos, that's also because of Araki.
Huge shout out to JojoWiki.com. It's one of the best fan sites I've come across in my research, and I'll leave a link for it down below. And finally, big thanks to AyakuWeb, who once again helped me research this video in Japanese sources, so